The taste of bitter strawberries flowed down her throat once more. The bruises on her skin slowly shrank, though they didn't disappear completely. She felt a small rush of rejuvenation through her body, returning to some energy that she lost during her fight. It was only a small amount that had cracked a bone or two she still had left in her body, but she could recover from a stab wound through the shoulder, and she could brush off a few bruises. With the bottle she emptied, she tossed it aside, a shiver running down through her body as the medical drink finished taking effect. She stood on her hooves and gave a small stretch, feeling her bones popping in place and her muscles ache. She panted softly as her lungs demanded for more air, and she sat back down. She knew she couldn't stay in one place for too long. She just needed a moment. Merlin's spell was doing circles in her head, trying to process the new information she just received. Though she knew about how it worked, she couldn't completely dispicture it. The spell had called for her to focus her magic onto a single spot and channel as much of it as she could into a single cast spell. It was a very all-or-nothing kind of spell that worried Twilight. He had said that the spell had the power to save everyone, but she could only get one chance to cast it. If she was willing to risk possibly passing out, or without being with her magic for a short while, in this hell of a world, she was still in fact that she would have to break through. Seal was broken. But no matter which way Twilight looked, she couldn't even think of how the spell could be used without the seal. Merlin certainly knew how to craft a spell, she thought to herself, letting out a low sigh as she stopped thinking about the spell for a moment. Merlin had said that the seal required for her to be under great emotional duress in order to break it. Not for a moment did she think about the seal would be a problem to break. She'd been hurt, nearly killed, broken down, crying several times, watched her friends being mutilated before her, and just let the world break her several times. Emotional duress she had plenty of. So she had a spell that could save everyone, but she couldn't use it right now. She had no idea what it did or why it did, or why it would result in that would be. She needed someplace safe, someplace where she could rest for a bit, and just let her magic recuperate after casting the spell. Finding Magus come to find that, but that would require her to escape the hell, so she would find herself in. She knew that it was possible, at least, every time she had come to facing some big monster in his ghastly world, at least return some sort of resemblance of Ponyville. But when the town was like where she would be able to find Magus, however, she had finished off being a big monster that nearly succeeded in killing her. The memory of her head floating away from her body in the black abyss came back to her as she put her hoof back up to her neck. She had very close to being killed, and yet here she was, still in this awful other world. I am trapped here now? Am I not allowed to leave? Twilight shuddered, taking a deep breath to try and calm herself. Her mind was still trying to escape again, and she had to keep it under control. She made it this far alive. She could make it out there alive. The sound of hooves striking the middle floor and from behind her made her nearly jump out of her skin. As quickly as she could muster, and she summoned the black sword that swung her body around, holding it ready to strike at the pony approaching from behind. Her vicious gaze fell upon the cloaked figure, strolling towards her before coming to a stop. Twilight recognized the pony she had completely forgotten about her every time she had shown up, but she had followed her through the whole incident, cryptically saying things that either didn't make sense or just left her with more questions. Never once had offered an explanation, given any assistance, or even shown her face. Twilight was sick of it now. She had enough of this nonsense to last for her lifetime. Stay right here. Don't you dare take another step, Twilight growled, her teeth clenching as she glared at the pony. Are you a monster? Aren't you? Show me your face. I'm sick of this. Sick of everything. Are you here to help me or kill me just like the rest of this town? Twilight can only hear herself panting heavily. The only thing was on her mind was the pony before her of what she was going on to do to them, if they were an enemy. The air was still between them, the cloaked pony not moving an inch, not saying a word. Twilight held the sword tightly, adjusting a little to ensure that she could get a clean swing in the shout of an attack in her way. She was watching carefully, making sure she didn't miss an ideal. The cloaked figure just remained quiet for what Twilight counted as a minute before it finally spoke up. Twilight Sparkle, I am not your foe. I am simply know of your woe. The pony reached up at her hood, covering her face, grabbing it and pulling back to reveal herself. Twilight's eyes widened and stared at the pony before her, if she could even call it a pony. She wasn't sure if it was enough to be called a pony. The pony in the robe was nothing more than a skeleton, all flesh and muscles bind to its bones. The black of its eyes, with its empty skull, stared back at her, its bony mouth opened as it began to speak more. I've watched over ponies since a long time gone, seen countless generations and their spawn. I see a flow and eras of past, while trying to see time through a looking glass. I see what can be done and what occurred, everything that life offers and that it will incur. I am there when life begins, to view all the pony's sins. You may say my name with your last breath. The cloaked figure tilted her head as a chill ran up Spike's back. Every pony knows me as Death. You can't be, Twilight cried out, slashing her sword through the air. The edge of its blade struck the ground, carving a small groove to it. You're Death? Death isn't a pony. It's a concept. There's no hair bigger, better than Death. You're lying. Twilight pointed at the sword of the robed skeleton before her, the sword slightly shaking as she tried to calm herself down. You still have your doubt after all, proof that your mind is not made out of the final fall. The mare's voice seemed to be joined by a quiet tapping, the sound of her bones clicking together as she talked. But this is the rare way we will part way. You can truly say that my words betray? The shaking sword flattered as Twilight tried to absorb her words. Of all the possibilities in this world, she would never have thought to meet someone, or something, that claimed to be a harbinger of death. Something that was the only true in fairy tales, stories passed on of a ghostly image you see before you die. With all the monsters she had seen in her life, she never thought of something would be the manifest concept of death itself. Okay, so what if you are Death? Why are you here? Why are you following me? An omen? Watching me as I slowly die in this world? Well, sorry to disappoint you. I have no plans of dying today. I'm going to save my friends, and I'm going to save Ponyville, and I'm going to bring an end to this nightmare once and for all. Her sword stopped, shaking, determination flowing through her body once more. If Death wanted her life, she wasn't about to hand it over. She had come too far just to let it end here. I come for thee, Twilight Sparkle. This world is seen as merciless and all feral, and the lives of so many tied to this world gathered together in one place, but all unfurled. The skeletal mare just turned away from Twilight, stepping towards one of the halls. Twilight, scared and confused, unsure of what Death's next move would be. Death raised her hoof to the wall and pressed it tightly and gently. She stood there for a moment, before removing her hoof from the surface. The sound of stone grinding against the steel began to echo through the empty ballroom, and was a split and began to open. A path appeared from behind the opening, appeared to be a lightless hallway leading somewhere. My hoofs were not made to dwell on the lands of the mortals, but I exist here only due to the maddened angels. I wish to have seen the realm that mocks and land cease to be, so that the ponies may once return to their lives carefree. You are the only one with power now, to defeat the darkness by heaven's vow. Death then stood up next to the opening, staring at Twilight. She shifted her hooves uncertain. She had no other way out of this room, but the way Death had opened for her. But that thought sent chills down her back. She had to follow Death's path, not though she liked it at least. She had considered her options for a moment, realizing she really didn't have that much of a choice. The world had been shown her repeatedly that she had to follow the paths before her, and that any other path would be blocked off, or locked unless she had a key, or solved some kind of puzzle. There was really no other option. Hesitantly, she put a hoof forward and began to walk. heading for the opposingly doorway stood before her. She came to a stop just a foot away from it, Death standing next to her. Death stared at her with that of a featureless face, as if the empty sockets could be seen straight to her soul. Another shiver ran down her back, and she turned to look at Death in the face. "Answer me just one more thing before I go," Twilight almost whispered, knowing that once she stepped forward, there was absolutely no turning back. "Are my friends okay?" "Whose those fates that tried to you will soon made clear. A fate similar to the eyes of the pale moon." The words cannot comfort Twilight a bit as she gripped the magic around her black blade. "I am certain their fate would be one you would find in your favor. Not every thread will leave you a quiver." "Right," Twilight murmured, looking back at the dark hallway before her. She raised her hoof and turned on the light from her pendant, illuminated some of the hallway before her. "I guess this is goodbye then." "You are correct that we will not meet this way again. The next time we meet will be under the gaze of the maidman." With those words, Death turned from Twilight and walked towards the center of the empty ballroom. Twilight's eyes followed her for a moment or two before returning to the hallway before her. Comforting, Twilight murmured to herself, before taking its first step into the darkened abyss. Once she had made several strides, the sound of grinding of stone on metal returned to the hallway, sealed off behind her, tapping her in the internal dark of the hallway, and the only light that came from her pendant. She kept the grip around her sword tight. There wasn't much room there, only maybe a foot or two on each side of her, but she had to move on forward. The light only reached a few feet ahead of her before greeting the thick darkness that encompassed the hallway. There were no sounds. There were just the constant beat of hooves against the ground. The walls remained dull red and covered in stains and cracks, the only things that crossed her vision as she walked. Step by step, she continued further down the hallway, her black sword hovering by her side, ready to strike at anything that might come across her path. She had no idea how far the path might stretch, but she knew as long as it continued to stretch forward, she had to follow it. There was no turning back. Her back, the way had been sealed, only for her goal now was to reach the end of this nightmare. "I suppose there is no forgiveness for me this time." Twilight then stopped in her tracks, and a familiar face echoed throughout the hallway. "Hello," she called out, desperate to hear a pony's voice again. "I've gone too far. There's no turning back." The voice echoed throughout the hall, as if coming back to the dark abyss before her. Realizing they might be ahead, she decided to pick up the pace, heading towards the end of the hallway faster now. "I suppose in the end, I have earned everything I have now." The voice sounded familiar, one she had heard in her life. It had been long since she had last heard it, but she knew that voice. But what if it's something that I have ever desired? It was Celestia's voice. She could hear her mentor's voice echoing through the hallway. Her quickened walk then turned into a full-on gallop, racing to try and to reach the end of the hallway, to see her face once more, to be able to hold on to an embrace, to know that she's okay. There's no undoing my sins. I can only look towards tomorrow. Where was she? Her voice was so clear, but it seemed so far away. Twilight had to reach her. She wanted to reach her. The echoes of her hooves were loudly in the desire to see her mentor once more. Perhaps one day I can atone these sins. Just Celestia's voice vanished as seemingly endless hallway opened up. Twilight skidded to a halt as a large room appeared before her. Twisted metal chandeliers circled around the ceiling and cast a dim light down to the circular room. On each side of the circular room there were two doors made of stone and covered in intricate carvings. In the center of the room was a massive door, covered with a large depiction of Celestia, pressed on against one of the crosses that she had seen down beneath her. Flames flickered already to burn the princess's flesh, while behind her were the shadows of ponies' knees, long since gone. At the bottom of the door were 4 squares, looking similar to the entrance that she had seen in town, indicate that something went into their slots. "Celestia, she must be through that door," Twilight said, hoping that her mentor was just within reach. She walked up to the large doors and inspected the holes, seeing writing underneath them. Only once the memories have gathered will be hollow to chamber open. With a press of her hoof, she confirmed that the doors weren't going to budge, just as another obstacle on her path. Twilight let out a reluctant sigh, and she took a step back, staring at the depiction of Celestia on the cross. She had already seen 3 ponies die in their hooves because she had a cursed symbol. She was about to let her mentor fall into the same fate. Her eyes wandered to the 4 doors around the room. She quickly stepped over to the one at the far right. The carvings at the door depicted a soldier with a weapon in its mouth and its face in a dragon. A few thoughts ran through Twilight's mind, but something told her that the key opening a big door in the smaller doors around the room. She had raised her hooves and pressed on it. The stone slowly opening, grinding against the floor. Stepping through the thick doors, they quickly closed behind her once she was in the room. It was a pitch black inside, save for the light coming from her pendant. She could see very far, but she thought that she could see the edges of the room. It seems to be a smaller, cramped and square room. Just barely enough for a pony to be able to live in it. A quiet shining groan then struck her ears as she pointed straight forward. Before her appearance in one of the many soldiers she had seen through a town. The clinking metal of hitting each other, and its head moved slowly. A small bit of flesh from it fell from its face as it turned towards the light. Its pain was coming down from the creature's light stared at it, the soldier moving quickly as it seemed to be just on its feet once more. It lowered its head and grabbed the spear that was lying in the hooves, picking up slowly. The soldier seemed different from the others. It didn't seem to move in a tragical position. It seemed slow and shambling, almost as if it didn't want to fight. But it started lurching forward, lifting the spear and lunging at Twilight. "Sorry, you're in my way," Twilight spoke quietly, the black sword moving swiftly from her side. The blade swung without hesitation, splitting the spear into pieces, and with another swift swing, the soldier stopped moving. The pain whining stopped as the 2 of them stood for a moment, before an armored pony crumbled into a pile on the floor. Blood began to spill from the soldier's neck, through not a drop appear on the blade. She made a cut and quick, swift, ending the fight before it really began. Twilight stared at the body, almost unable to recognize what she had struck down yet another living being. The first time she'd done it, she nearly broke down and cried, even though it had tried to eat her. She never wanted to kill it, but she killed so many now. How many she had tried to kill in her own return? That was another monster dead? They weren't ponies, no matter what Magus said. She couldn't hold back against them, or else she'd find herself dead. And she had to live. She really had to. She was the only one who could stop all this. Twilight nearly jumped as the light appeared from the body of the soldier, started flowing up in the air, heading for the center of the room. Twilight stared as the light centered itself, and then it began to expand. Her eyes widened as she just realized that this was just like the other times her vision had before she shrouded in light. It was a light that always accompanied memories. "Captain!" The loud cries of the soldiers rang out at the blast intense of engulfed fire in its being. In a matter of moments, a charred corpse of a body fell to the ground. A dragon's roar pierced through the following silence, which caused the soldiers to erupt in frenzy of panicking yells. The large bodies of soldiers began to scramble, some even fleeing from the battlefield, while others looked for places to hide. Any semblance of organized fights, of how it had been lost, the fear and panic swelling through the soldiers. Towering before the soldiers was the huge black dragon, the one that filled the hearts of the ponies with dread, and Koligia, the dragon of apocalypse. "No, stop! You mustn't run away now. We have to fight." The grand ruler of Equestria, Princess Celestia, stood before the soldiers, looking at them in shock. "If we lose now, we lose Equestria forever." "Princess, we must escape!" A panicked soldier near the princess cried. "We lost 70% of our soldiers. The captain has just been obliterated, and we barely even have made a dent on the beast. We can't win. We have to escape," the soldier said, and then turned and ran. The battlefield was once filled with soldiers was emptying, leaving only charred body and remains of the fellow ponies behind. "Stop! Or I order you to fight!" Celestia bellowed out loud, but no soldier listened to the command of their leader. The field was emptying of soldiers, leaving the alicorn alone in the fight. You cowards!" the monarch bitterly spat. The loud thud of the mass of muscle stepping behind her broke away from her thoughts, and her heart sunk. The hot air filling the dragon's breath rushed over to her neck, and chills ran down her spine, and just as her head slowly turned, the black dragon appeared within the corner of her vision. Another billow of the hot air crossed on her back as she, in the deep chuckle of it, ran through the dragon's neck. "So the mighty ruler of Equestria, stranded by her soldiers." Ha ha ha. The dragon laughed, staring at the princess who was unable to move. "Oh, the mighty do fall. It's laughable to think you even stood a chance against me." "Analogica," Celestia hissed. Her body slowly turned to face the dragon. Her eyes glared with daggers, but failed to hide the fear that surrounded her. "You will not destroy my lands or my subjects. We will stop you." Her words were interrupted when the air escaped from her body. A large sharp talons of Archana wrapped around her body, squeezed and lifting her up into the air. Suddenly Archana brought her down to her face level with him, his row of teeth gleaming through his grin. "Your land, your subjects?" And Concholiga lifted his head and laughed echoed across the land. Celestia's eyes twitched as she struggled to breathe, her whole body shuddering from the sound of the mighty dragon laughing. Her body shifted as his hand moved, turning to face her lands that had been fighting on. "View your land and your subjects. I don't see anything that belongs to you anymore." The fields surrounding the battle were scorched black, fires burning in various spots. Charred and maimed corpses littered the grounds, the remains of the very large army she had acquired to fight the dragon. The lush of the world that they had just stepped into had been reduced to nothing but a burning wasteland of death. A sharp pain filled her chest as she stared at the destruction of the things that held her dear. "You no longer rule these lands, princess. These lands are now mine." Celestia then turned to meet his gaze once more, her eyes staring back at the red depths of his vision. She gritted her teeth, unable to say anything, barely even able to breathe. There was nothing she could do anymore. She was powerless. "Damn you!" she bitterly spat again, struggling to have against his hand. "There is no point in struggling anymore. Just accept it. You all belong to me. I decide whether you live or die, whether you have a home today or not. I get to enjoy every moment playing with your lives." The dragon chuckled, seeing the look of fury on Celestia's face, knowing just how powerless she actually was. "But for you, dear princess, I'm willing to let you live, but under the condition that you serve me the rest of your days." Celestia's eyes widened at the horror at his words. You can't be serious." Her lip trembled as the horrors of the situation began to settle in. "It's either that or you die here," the dragon chuckled, his grinning growing wider as he stared her down. Celestia's mouth hung agape as she tried to even process what he was saying. She was the ruler of Equestria, and she wasn't anyone's subject. She had helped the age of ponies out of its darkest times, out of being ruled by a madman and corrupted royalty. She had even had the world a better place. Only for the dragon, this monster was to seize everything she had worked for? "Very well," the dragon growled. Before she even had a chance to respond, his large mouth opened, bearing several rows of razor-sharp teeth for her to see, somewhat clearly stained with blood that had once belonged to her former soldiers. Her slimy tongue rolled out, and her head was being placed into its mouth, its hot breath washing over her face and mane. This can't be the end!" Celestia's mind panicked, flashes of teeth crunching down on her neck appearing in her mind. I can't die here. I've lived for so long already. What were the last 1,000 of years for if I die now? What's even the point of everything I've done?" The world seemed to have moved slowly as she felt the heat grow hotter and the mouth open wider. She was seconds away from devouring her. No, I can't. I can't die here. I can't die! Wait! and Anachika stopped his movements, hearing the shrill cry of Princess in his mouth. He slowly pulled her out, realizing the eyebrow, and was curious as he looked at the trembling princess in his hand. Her voice crackled. Hot tears began to stroll down her cheeks. I'll do it. And Anachika's grin, affected by the devilish joy upon hearing those words. That's what I thought. His draconic voice chuckled. I'm glad we come into this agreement. What do you want me to do? She nearly bit her tongue as the words fell from her mouth with her vile bite. Every inch of her mind was telling her what she was doing was wrong. She couldn't stop herself. She had to live. She had to. Well, you see, I can't possibly be anywhere in this Equestria at once, as much as I love ravage more lands to partake of these delicacies. So what I want from you, dear princess, is to periodically send me your subjects. His laughter echoed once more. You will send them to me for me to feast on, so I may participate in the ponies from the two parts of the country at once. Celestia's mind reeled. He was ordering her to send her subjects to near death, their death. Not just their death, but to be eaten, to be devoured by this dragon. The subjects that looked up to her, that trusted her, and that saw her as the leader that carried out within the dark ages of ponykind. He was asking her to betray them, betray all of them, just so she could live, send them to die in their place. Well, and Anachika did not care for an answer. Answer now, or I'll just devour you. Celestia's head lowered, tears striking her scales as she gritted her teeth. Fine, I'll send you my subjects. The draconic laughter echoed across the fields as Anachika let out a long, bellowing laugh. His laughter echoed throughout the ears and to her heart, and as she could feel it shattering into pieces. The memory of Celestia, Twilight murmured to herself. The light died down, and she stood once more in the dark room, barely illuminated by her pendant. The bloody body of the dead soldier lay before her. Her body shuddered slightly, taking a deep breath as she calmed her arching, aching nerves. I can't even pretend to not know that she must have felt. Twilight closed her eyes, the images of Celestia's face still fresh in her mind, to be forced to sacrifice her own people, just so the others might live. The black sword gripped with her magic floated upwards as she looked into the blade, the reflection of herself just barely within the view from its shined edge, so that she could live. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Her teacher and her mentor had agreed to the others should die so that she could live. It wasn't kind of the image Twilight would have pictured as her teacher. Celestia, the ruler of Equestria, cared deeply for her subjects. Twilight can only picture Celestia ever giving herself up to those people that might live, but the memory laid there told her the opposite. Celestia would sacrifice her people so she might live. There must have been a grander purpose. Twilight's words were so quiet they didn't even have the chance to echo back to her. A reason that she wanted to live. After all, Anachika still lived, and if she had died, then who could stand to face him? Though she had lost, she had still had to face him, to stop him from ruling the land. They were the only words that convinced Twilight to accept what she had seen. Her teacher was not a selfish monster, willing to sacrifice her people out of the violent ruler who had knew what had to be done. The sound of stone hitting the floor struck her ears as she quickly looked away from her sword. On the ground next to her dead soldier was a tile. Etched to the surface was the same carving she had seen on the door. A dragon facing down a soldier. I see. I need to gather 4 of those to open the door. The tile began to float, quickly disappear, joining Twilight's magical revisor. She then turned around and opened the grinding door stone once more. Entering the circular room that contained 5 doors, she had completed the first. One required 4 tiles in order to open. Her mind quickly told her that the same other 3 doors had also held memories, to which was the same as this one had. She quickly swallowed the bubbling fear that she had appeared in her throat, and walked up next to the door of the ones that she had just entered. On its surface was a picture of a pony, reading a book with Celestia. Looming over the head was a carved into the door. A few possibilities ran through Twilight's head. but there was only one way to know if they were correct. Raising her hooves, she pressed against the door. It slowly opened, grinding against the floor once more. The first thing that hit her eyes was the familiar sound of paper being crumbled, as if though it was being eaten by the light of her pendant that followed her next, following back upon the creature she had seen in Stallion Guard Library. Her sword rose before her as the creature seemed to stop, noticing her presence. She wouldn't give it the time to attack. Its blank round head turned to face her, as well as a swift black blade soared through the air. In an instant, with the sword embedded with the depth of the creature's neck, the devourer of the books let out a sickening howl of pain, before it was silenced by twilight splitting its neck in half. The bubbleless body fell to the ground, blood oozing from the large wound on its neck, its life still slipping away. She had gotten quite good at killing. The actions were coming to it by instinct now, and there was a monster before her that had wanted to take her life. She couldn't afford to get hurt any more than she already did, so she had to end it quickly. Aim for the vital points, the head, the neck, the heart, the brain. A deceived blow to any part of them would end the battle quickly and in her favor. Yet for a moment she wondered that if this would have felt like to be a soldier. Just as her thoughts came to her mind, a familiar light appeared from the body before her, floating up to the center of the room. It quickly filled the room once more, her vision becoming trapped in one of her mentor's memory. The young mare was trussed to the ground, a hoof slammed down on her back, causing her to yelp out in pain as she struggled to breathe. Her struggle against under the hoof until it dug into her back, causing her to wince. She looked up slowly, seeing the illuminating finger of Princess Celestia sitting on her throne. The cold, cruel eyes of a vicious leader looked down upon her. "Golden Seal," the commanding voice of the princess boomed forth, "though thee henceforth charged with the illegal acquisition of information and treason to the throne, how does thee thou plea?" "Not guilty!" the yellow mare cried out loudly, only to have her breath stolen by the hoof of her back. I am loyal to the crown, my princess. I would never betray." Another stomp of her hoof silenced her. Princess Celestia then glared down at the mare, her horn lighting up as several books were drawn forth before her. Though Ricardo in the only possession of these thrones, the redhead hoofed in the middle of reading them. These tomes contain vital secrets of the equestrian kingdom, and though we're just surprising to them, if you own them. Celestia's hoof slammed down on her chair as she glared at the mare. "And though this the nerve to say thou is not guilty, your highness." The mare coughed, a small trickle of blood forming at the edge of her mouth. It's true what you say. I began to read one, but I am no traitor. Equestria is my home. I bear will no ill towards the kingdom or the throne. I just want to know more so that I might be able to help the kingdom further." "We know that though truth speaks lies," Celestia boomed, causing the whole court to wince in fright. "Though the comments of the land of the Lord Gemstone contemplate a little stallion who has been charged for attempting to overthrow our kingdom, though art in our league is just such a villainous royal." "No!" Golden cried out, her eyes whitened in fear. "I would never have betrayed you, your majesty. I swear it on my life." "Then the life that we shall have." Celestia slammed her foot down on the ground once more. "Take this peasant away. She shall know what it means to betray the crown." The golden body trembled with fear, her eyes watering as her guards picked her up, dragging her away, thrashing. "No, princess, please! I would never betray you! I never meant for any of this to happen! Please, please listen!" The doors to Celestia's throne room shut as the mare disappeared from behind them. There was no lingering silence that had left in this room once her departure left, a feeling of the air that would not dissipate, yet no one would dare to speak a word of it. "I will return to my chambers now," Celestia spoke, standing up from her throne. "Do not disturb me unless it's a grave impertinence." The guards of her throne quickly saluted as she walked out of the throne room, headed for her chambers. "Though Gus have grown colder since the battle," a voice cut out from the thick air, causing Celestia to stop. There was only one pony who would dare to speak such a manner. "We cannot dare to imagine what they is thy witness, but though return change. Our battles do not concern of that, though, little sister, Celestia almost growled, not wanting to turn her to face her sister Luna. She stepped out from the shadows, standing beside Celestia, her gaze unchanging. Our kingdom is changing, not with the ideals of hope in mind. Little hope that we could stop it. Though for the arrest of who controls the royals, our crown has a little power these days. Don't need a no lecture. We have seen our kingdom for our own eyes. We will save it. Then let's do it together, sister. For the reason should our powers have been divided. Celestia. Luna then stepped closer to Celestia, and Celestia's own aggravation growing with Luna's words. We recognize the crown has more power in thee hooves, but those should not know in the matter won't last if you do not want it to. Tell our court, tell our people, tell them we shall work together. Under the name of crown the crown is nothing but a lie, Celestia bellowed, turning her head against the glare of her sister. Luna then stepped back in horror, unable to believe her eyes. Celestia glared at her sister, malice coursing through her veins. Though what has to be done to help my kingdom, all thou has to be done is stand and let the others do the work. Through thoughts of the weak and doubt fill my mind. If our kingdom was left to you, there'll be no longer be a kingdom to rule. Luna was appalled, taking another step back. Her head was lowered upon hearing her sister's backlash. Celestia gritted her teeth, glaring at the younger alicorn for a moment before realization struck her. She then turned her head away, tried to calm down, knowing that she was speaking out the anger instead of logic. "These 5 words cut deep like a dagger," Luna growled in return. "We will do our best to save our kingdom, thou knowest nothing." Luna then turned and fled away in the hallway, leaving Celestia standing there alone, left to contemplate in her thoughts. The alicorn then stood alone, unmoving for several moments, letting the stress and weight of her position and the power sink in fervor. Then she stepped forward, heading back to her room.